What up, meatheads? This is Travis, American Butcher, and this is the Meat Block Podcast, the weekly podcast by butchers for everyone. In this week's episode of the Meat Block Podcast, I always notice that when I say in this week's episode, I do this weird little laugh. In this week's episode of the Meat Block. In this week's episode of the Meat Block. And that was one of the most annoying things about editing and listening to last week's episode was not my intro laugh, because I think it's camp and greatest thing ever, was listening to me laugh at my own jokes as the Focus on Farming convention. And then I've trained myself not to say, on this show, and also had the luxury of editing it. And when I was first starting off in this show, I would edit every single out. And then I just learned not to say it when I had the record button. But there, on the Focus on Farming, in front of all those people, I did not have that luxury. And one thing I took away from that whole event was I should come prepared with better notes and not laugh at my own jokes because it just sounds terrible. Like I just wanted to crawl through my headphones and punch myself in the dick every time I told and then no one else did. I hated it. And also, I need business cards. All these people approached me afterwards and were like, "Do you have a business card?" And I was like, "No, let me write my name and contact info on a piece of paper and a pen. By the way, do you have a pen and a piece of paper I could borrow?" Because that's what kind of professionalism we have here at the Meat Block. Anyway, enjoy this show.
Good cutting enhances the quality of good meat. Poor cutting results in an inferior piece of meat, regardless of quality.
This episode, it is all me, all Travis, all the time. So hope you're ready, ladies and gents. So due to weird circumstances and David not just able to get his shit together and send me stuff on time, and Ryan's busyness with life, I lost some cargo. David will be back next week with our regular show. But this week, I'll be doing just like a Q&A. This is a bunch of the Q&As that I've gotten over the years. And I'm just going to read them candidly and answer candidly on the show. So, I hope you enjoy. All these questions were submitted via Instagram. And if I don't read your name, it's not because I don't want to give you credit. It's just because I honestly can't pronounce your name and don't want to go through that embarrassment. So this one. What is your favorite sausage? I like a classic country sausage, classic breakfast sausage. Loose, cooked in gravy, and on top of some biscuits. And then my second sausage would have to be I love chorizo. Cooked, usually with some eggs. Oh, that sounds so good. I guess what I'm really getting at is that breakfast is my favorite meal of the day. And I like any sausages that go alongside that meal. Next question. Would you recommend an apprenticeship or classes to learn the trade? Now, I get this question asked very frequently. And I've said it multiple times that I learned through real world experience. I never thought that cutting meat would be something that I would do if you were to ask the teenager me. It'd probably be like, what are you talking about? Because the teenager me is a vegetarian, and that's weird. Also, why are you asking me questions about the future? Are you a time traveler? And then I'd probably talk about time travel. But what I would honestly recommend is just real world experience, which may be difficult depending on where you are in your life, as far as family commitment, social economics, and where you live, things like that. But what's also harder than that is paying money while supporting your life, unless you're young, unless you're using it as instead of a trade school. And then, which we don't really have a recognized system here in America. When I was giving that focus on farming talk a few weeks ago, people were talking about how do we get more people interested in the meat trades, and they asked this, and I didn't really know the answer of how to get people more interested in the meat trade. I have these grand ideas of like, wouldn't it be great, like Rob Slater and the American team and Danny, my team captain, we've all heard the ideas of like creating a global community, then having butchers be able to share apprentices and things like that. But that was mostly for people who are already in the trade. But how do we get, and Rob Slater, his whole mission statement is to want to get young people excited in being in the trade. But that works in countries with that built-in system, with that built-in structure that have those programs. Here in America, to become a quote-unquote butcher or a meat cutter, you mostly have to work at it. There's no programs really anymore. And that's why people always say it's a dying trade here in the States, because we have this mechanized food system in metropolitan areas and areas of dense people population that are removed from their food source. And sure, I've worked at shops that have apprenticeship programs. And what that means is someone will give money, learn something a specific way that shop wants to teach them, then have no recognized certification here in the States, or certainly recognized internationally. And I'm just talking about America. Last time I talked about this, people messaged me and said like Canada has this, and I know that there's like universities out there that have food science programs, and there's ag schools and things like that. And ag schools and ag programs are great for degrees in animal science and food science. But the person who's working at the grocery store, or the person working on the packing line or the bone-in line, they didn't do any of that. Maybe the plant manager did, who can't pick up a knife. But people I've trained in the past, they do. I think one person used it so they could get a job at their mission statement. And I was like, why do you want to do this apprenticeship program, quote unquote? And it was like, because Costco, this was in 2000, like a few years ago when the economy was still up and down. They're like, well, because Costco pays this much with benefits. And it was like, wow, that's pretty good. And at the time it was the most, and I don't know what it is now for union shops or not. Seattle, I know, is like one of the last places that, like, if you want to be a meat cutter in the city, you have to work union. And I'll talk about that in a second, which I think is unique. But other people who went through this apprentice program were, one, able to afford the apprenticeship program. Then they went on to work at boutique high-end shops and were very successful. Some of them opened up shops. Some of the people that I've gone through programs with used it to add it to their resume, their chef resume. They could also write in the word butcher next to cook or next to head chef, which is great. But all these people could afford to do that. And all these people really didn't, for the most part, go to the grocery stores or go to the big outlets. I was miserable a few years ago when I was looking to move out of Southern California, and I was reaching and grasping at anything to get me out of that hellhole, not because of the location, but because of the work environment that I was in. And I was applying at places online, and I applied for a meat cutting job at a Safeway just to get me out of the city and get me back on I was looking for escape. And I applied. They called me back and pretty much said, like, I was like, I put down I could break whole animals. I put down all like HACCP and all this. And they called me back pretty much to say that, oh, that's great. But we start out everybody who were going to relocate or going to move in our store, even though it was a meat cutting job. I had to start off 2 months retrieving carts and being a bagger at minimum wage. And I was like, well, it says you need a meat cutter. And like, well, we do that. And then we place people to what department fits for them, which is a big gamble. So not one I was willing to take. And I was like, well, what about like all this skill and they could give two shits that I knew how to do rail. They could give two shits that I knew stuff about food safety. That's how they were going to do it. So even doing, I guess, an apprenticeship program, it's still like a gamble. I think just the real way to really get into this industry is go out to I would recommend going to a game processor and just hanging around and asking them. And then in the slow season or maybe even the busy season, ask them to give you skills or get a job as a wrapper at a local cotton wrap facility. Because there's a lot of overhead. I mean, not overhead. There's a lot of overturn. So eventually, if you're there, you'll move up. Just pick up. Because the first job I got in this industry, I certainly didn't think this was going to be the beginning of a career. I just needed work. Eventually, it morphed into that, and it morphed into snowballed, and became bigger than anything I would imagine. And certainly, teenager me would be like, what? Time traveling Travis? That's my new nickname. So would I recommend an apprenticeship or classes to learn? Bottom line, I would recommend real life experience. Also going to a class, also quote unquote a demo. What would you really take away from like unless it's like a 4-day sausage making class? You know, you go to a butcher demo, you'll learn how to cook things and it'll be great, but it's a demo. A class indicates that you're going to walk away with more, I guess. Favorite cut of meat. And I would have to say, it used to be like a ribeye. I'd be like, I love ribeye. And then last year, I was interviewing Danny, the team captain of the Butchers of America team. Before I was even on the team, I was just interviewing him for this show. And he said I asked that same question to everybody. And people went around and said, you know, Delmonico, ribeye, this and that. And chuck eye and Danny just said ground beef or like a hamburger. And, you know, just when people started asking me that, I would say like, what's your favorite cut of meat? I'd just say ground beef or hamburger. Cause it's cheeky and it's hard to fuck up, but it's so versatile from, you know, like a bolognese to a meat sauce, to a literal hamburger, to chili, to adding ground to so many different products as a filling, as a stuffer. You could wrap other meat in it and then bake it. You could take products that you put in your case, your steaks, that don't sell, but you know you can move it and grind. You could always just grind it and move it later if you're at a small shop that will allow you to do that. So I'd honestly have to say that ground beef is my favorite cut of meat. And interesting side note, what's the difference between ground beef and hamburger? Ground beef is off the rail. What comes off the rail and goes into your trim. Hamburger is off the rail what you have, and if you add something to it or take it away. Hamburger is essentially an added value product. For example, you bone a beef off the rail, and it is 80% to 20% lean to fat. You want it fattier. And even though you take that same fat from that same beef and you add it back in, then recalculate it and reblend it, that is now hamburger. Someone asked, goat meat, ? Have you eaten or processed it? Yes, both. Don't do it that often, but a lot of times cut sheets for goats are going to be the same as lamb. But then just as many times as that, it's about 50-50. It's going to be bone-in stew where you just take the entire goat and just chunk it up in a couple inch pieces on the bandsaw. Goat has a certain clientele, certain, I don't want to say people because that sounds weird and not right, but it's certainly not popular in, I guess, Western European cuisine as it is in other parts of the world. So it's not as often that I get to work with it just because the places I sell to, or mostly my company. By mostly, I mean my company I work for now exclusively does pork and beef. But in the past, at cut and wrap facilities I've worked at, we've done our first share of venison, elk, bear, water buffalo, bison, elk. I think I already said elk. Camo. Not camo, like camels. And alpacas. Or llamas. I always forget which ones they were, because they look the same. But yes, I've done butchered goat as well. And lamb. And sheep. And mutton. And yearlings. Now, this is a good question. I like this. How do you deal with silver skin? This shit sucks to take off. Just reps, man. Just, it's like that 10,000 hour rule that you just keep doing it and keep doing it. And it's like, people always say like, I hate boning out chucks, or I hate doing this, or I hate doing this. You do something long enough, you don't even realize what it is you're doing. You could do it and sing a song or think about your day, or just, when I'm cutting meat, one of the last things I'm thinking about is what's actually in front of me. It's just becomes second nature. So just repetitiveness will help you with that. And then proper technique. You can't repetitively do it wrong. Certainly learn how to do it right. And then, I remember when I was first learning how to cut meat, I would cut steaks and my elbow would be out, and the cutter, or my boss at the time would be yelling at me, like, keep that fucking elbow down. And I never knew why he was so concerned with it. But now it's down and it just feels natural. Yeah. Just repetitive. And then just like your knife is an extension of you. And like with silver skin, it's like, the best example of removing silver skin, or the best thing is like, tenderloins. Like you see, like this weird thing is like, I see like Nurse from Instagram removing silver skin on a tenderloin, and he leaves so much margin on it. So don't do that. Get it tighter. Get the technique down, and then I guess build up the speed. And then it's about quality first, then speed. But if anyone tells you it's and or, no, you could have both, and you need to have both in this industry. You need to be fast and you need to have good quality. I was trained with a stopwatch, and but yeah, just I guess when you're first starting out and you first think of that, like, oh, silver skin sucks, just like make sure you do the proper strokes, and instead of like gilling it, like when you see them at a flat iron and you see people take these hesitation marks, just bigger strokes, and then get that bigger stroke tighter on that silver skin. Someone asked, do you sell natural condoms? No, I don't. I was wondering once, that if you, like, because you always hear people talk about, like, how sheep intestines were the first condoms. Was it, like, casing? Well, first off, like, sheep intestine I would like to think of myself more as a hog intestine type of guy than a sheep intestine kind of guy. More of a 4-to-1 than an 8-to-1. But would you tie it off and then remove it? What if you were overzealous and had a lot going on that evening, entertaining wise? Could you put like a whole hank on and then tie it off and then pull it and then cut it and then tie it off again? That's the kind of things I think about here at the Meat Block, and that's the kind of quality entertainment you could expect to keep hearing from this show as we move forward. What's your favorite steak marinade? Unless it's carne asada, salt and pepper. So I want to ask, does animal-free or synthetic casing exist? Now, when you say casing, it's all about the achieved result. I don't know definitively if there's like a sausage casing that exists that is animal-free, nor do I know why there would be. It seems like asking me that sausage would maintain animal products. But then you look at like essentially what is like collagen casing that you remove a like mortadella out of, or remove like a serve-a-lot or salumi off of before serving. And that collagen casing is essentially a mold to help it. And think of like a pate mold that keeps it the shape during the process of making it. So it does in that sense. I also imagine there's probably you can make like a casing out of seaweed jello. And again, I don't know why you would want to. It's something I've never researched, and I'm certainly not going to research it for this answer. Then this is my favorite question from my friend Dorian Hood. Do you have a copy of that movie we made in high school? Now, this movie we made was amazing. It was a World War II movie called the Battle of Monte Cassino, which was this German battle in Italy. Now, this is back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when I guess it was appropriate for kids to film a high school movie with real assault rifles, mini 14s, and take them out to the woods to this old abandoned hunting lodge, which was Knapp's Castle. There's about 10 of us running up there dressed as Germans and Italians and Americans and saying the phrases sauerkraut and yank and pretending to shoot each other with real assault rifles. You can't make that movie nowadays as a school project. And yes, I do have a copy of it. Someone asks, have you ever had any injuries dealing with those sharp blades? Absolutely. My first day ever in this industry, as far as the anecdote of talking about how I drank blood and killed animals, I cut my fingers, doing something super basic. And it was super embarrassing. My forearms look like I play with kittens all day, not because of knives, but because of feather bones off of carcasses. And I've had my index finger partially or mostly removed or cut off. Because I was teaching someone how to eviscerate a pig, and I was saying, before you start that, you may want to wash that shit off. And where my hand should have maybe got wet from the hose, a 6-inch boning knife cracked the H-bone right with my index finger in the way. It was not sweet. And then another time that I've cut myself that stands out very memorably, I was doing a It wasn't a pork class. It was a pork demo, because remember, these people would not be able to leave this class and say if they knew how to do it. There was cheese and wine and pitcher opportunities. But within the first 10 seconds of this demo, something happened and I cut my finger and I just powered through it as if I didn't. Everyone there knew that I did. I knew that I did. And I just kept smiling and said, I'll be right back. And I came back and all of a sudden I had a glove on. Had a nylon glove on where the index finger just slowly got red. I guess purple, because it's a blue glove. And of course, I've seen horrific injuries that I've talked about in previous episodes. People getting trampled, people being in weird situations, mostly on the slaughter end, manipulating animals that have a different idea of what they want to do than what you want them to do. I could talk for hours about that kind of shit. In the Horror Stories episode, in the past, I've talked about things like that. Next question. What's the proper way to trim jowls for the glands? Well, you take the jowl, skin side on the table, and you kind of just fillet the glands off. And there's a lot of glands on the inside of the jowl, so you want to make it so it's like, you kind of want to get it so that meat is exposed and that there's not those little orange things anymore. Someone asked, how much experience do you think a person should have before they could identify as a quote unquote butcher? It's one of those things where it's like, I sway back and forth of what that word means. And we did a whole episode about that. And does it really matter? But for me, honestly, if someone says they are a butcher and I am in the weeds and it's like their first day, that I could give them a cut sheet and a side of animal and not be thrown for a loop when I come back an hour later with what they presented me. Like, yes, there may be, the ribeyes maybe look a little bit different than how I would do it, or the trim specs may be a little bit different, but the overall, it wouldn't be overwhelming and they wouldn't be lost in it, that they could take that creative freedom. And then if they were going to work with me, then I would tweak it to our company standards. But essentially that's what it means. That it's like, here's a cut sheet, fill it out or do it. I got this question asked twice when I put this out, but anything you liked about working retail? And yes, as much as where I wasn't the coolest and the shitty people stand out as far as customers, because it makes better stories, but they're the anomaly. That for the most part, people there are great. People are understanding. People are awesome. And I loved, genuinely talking and meeting nice people. I've met my wife working retail. I certainly like that. I liked, as much as I love working a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, essentially, even though it's like a 7 to whatever. But working split shifts, I miss being able to do stuff on a random Wednesday, or being able to get the things I need to get done at the DMV. I miss the creative thinking of trying to get away or trying to get fresh product out the door, or, dealing things that weren't selling and turning them into something new. And I miss, being able to get a drink after work with some of your coworkers. It for the majority, I enjoyed it, as it was actually happening. But the shitty parts are the loudest parts. That's what resonates in my mind, is the overworking, the tired, and a bunch of other random shit that came with it. Someone asked, do you still do charcuterie? Well, at my work, we still make pepperoni and Landjaeger, and we still do experiments with Bayonne ham. A few years ago, I used to do homemade charcuterie at my house, back when I had a basement, and before my son was walking and talking and able to use more of my attention. So now when I'm not working or crabbing, I hang out with him, and he even hangs out with the crabbing too. So projects like the charcuterie took a backseat. Projects like having my basement cut and wrap took a backseat. And then I moved to a place that didn't have a basement, and I didn't have my cut shop in my house anymore. And then just overall, I realized after doing some cutting and some wrapping and some custom exempt processing that I just didn't find it that enjoyable to spend my weekends doing that it wasn't allowing me to be present in my family's life. And I didn't know why I was doing it. I was chasing money, and I didn't need it. So, no, I don't do homemade charcuterie anymore. Someone asked, can I dry age meat in my refrigerator for like a few days? I'm sure you could. I think it would just be used in a refrigerator like how it's designed to be used. It won't do anything. Minimum 21 days. That's when you're going to start seeing proteins get denuded for it to start making it tender or more tender-er. And then around, 28 days is when the flavor profile really kicks in. And anything after that, it's not going to become more tender. It's just going to make it give you that taste, that umami taste, that earthy, grassy taste. Someone asked, how many siblings do I have? I have 2 older brothers, one 9 years older, one 6 years older. I am called the accident baby, or the let's help keep this marriage together baby. I'm just joking. I know my mom listens to the show, and so does my dad. And they're happily divorced from each other. They're actually still both married to other people. Short Loin asks, which is your favorite Golden Girl? Well, I don't really have one, but I will tell you this little anecdote that I have a cousin, and she is blind, and she loves the Golden Girls. And she didn't realize that B. Author was a woman until she was in her 20s, after watching it for years and years and years. And I just want to know, I want to experience a level of mind blown like that. I haven't. Just imagine, like, your whole world being shifted, like, what? Bruce Willis is dead the whole time? The author is a man? Or a woman? Wow. And by no means am I trying to be transphobic or any of that, but just imagine being blind and listening to her voice. She has a deeper voice than most women on TV. So I just want to make that clear. Someone asked, will you have, or would you ever have a vegan on the show to debate with? And the answer is absolutely not. I don't want to introduce that level of headache or needless bullshit into my life for no reason. And I don't mean that like their beliefs are terrible. I just mean that you meet people with such strong convictions on something, and now in our world in 2018 that it's people have lines drawn in the sand about politics. And it's the same with vegans, but they've had their line drawn in the sand for years. And nothing I could say will ever make a majority of them see it my way. And nothing they could say could make me really change my core beliefs on this with in the span of a show. Certainly, our beliefs and ideas changed. They most likely at one point were eating meat, and then things over time made them see things in a different way. But for the most part, I try to fly under the radar with them because of the death threats I've gotten from my family on social media, through Instagram. And I just don't want them to have a platform. I'm sure it would like fuck up my ratings because then they'd be aware and all their vegan friends would give me like 1 star. Which brings me to my last question. How can I support the show? And the best way to support the show is by leaving a 5-star review. And please leave a comment. And if you want to get a hold of us at the show, you can email us at themeatblockpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to get a hold of me, you could at me on Instagram at American Butcher. And if you truly want to support butchery in general, then please head over to the Butchers of America GoFundMe page, and that link is in my bio. That link will be in the show note. And please donate and help us organize practices, organize travel. Well, you won't be actually doing the organizing, but your contributions will. If you want to sponsor the team and have your logo on a world stage, and yes, we confirmed our venue. It is going to be at the King One Golden State Arena in beautiful Sacramento, California, 2020. The date, I think I know it, but I'm not going to say it because I'm not 100% sure. September-ish of 2020. So if you have a brand and or service and want to give us money, especially since it's coming down to the end of the year with write-offs, please email me. Please check out that GoFundMe. If you want sponsorship, I will send you a sponsorship doc and show you all the amazing things that Team America and your brand and or service can do together. Until next time, keep your knives sharp and live in the margin.